Team that spoke in the opening government, Team D's. Congratulations to them. I'm happy. So a couple of notes about what's about to happen here. You're going to see a debate. And the motion that you're going to see the debate on is that given mounting evidence of long-term cognitive damage sustained by players, football fans have a moral duty to refrain from supporting the NFL. We have two sides in this debate. The proposition side is going to be arguing on behalf of that motion, saying that fans do have a moral duty to refrain from that support. The opposition side is going to be arguing that fans are just fine to watch the NFL and support it in any way that they choose. There are four teams in this debate, the opening and closing proposition, and the opening and closing opposition. Each one of these speakers from each of those four teams is going to get 1 7-minute speech to make their best case for or against the motion. We'll start with a speech from the proposition, alternate back and forth between the proposition and the opposition until each speaker has had that one chance to make their best case for or against the motion. During that speech, you're going to hear a series of bells. They sound like this. You're going to hear one bell at 1 minute into each speech, and another single bell when there's 1 minute remaining in that speech. In that intervening 5 minutes, points of information are allowed. Points of information are brief interruptions from an opposing speaker during the primary speaker's speech. Those interruptions can be in the form of a question or in the form of a brief argument that the speaker is expected to respond to. Keep in mind that it's at the discretion of the person holding the floor whether or not he or she wants to accept that point of information. So you might see speakers during their speech waving down requests for points of information or saying not at this time. They're not being rude. That's part of what we expect them to do to manage their time appropriately. Another convention of this type of debate is that we love audience interaction. Most people, having been here before, know that the traditional way we do this is to pound on something and say, "Here, here." It's a good time to practice that now so you don't feel uncomfortable. Here, here. If you hear an argument that you really support, if there's some piece of evidence that resonates with you or some position that the debater articulates that you agree with, by all means let them know. It encourages them to argue, and it makes the debate a little bit more enjoyable for everybody who's had a chance to come out and watch it. So, I am pleased to acknowledge our Speaker of the House, Deborah Mevin, who is going to take control of the round. Chairing our esteemed panel of judges tonight is going to be Parker Dahl. Deborah, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you and ask you to call the House to order.
On the topic of having a moral duty to refrain from NFL support, we welcome the opening government, David Rags from the team Afro Pride, to open today's debate. Hear, hear.
It is my first debate, so I'm a little excited. Good evening. Thinking about this topic, my first round went to Marshawn Lynch for some reason. I was telling Jimmy one day, I was like, man, I'm going to come in here and be like, every time they ask me a question, so I'm like, I'm thankful. We're at home now, but I just want to share some facts. Check this out. Millions of people, including some of ourselves, tune in to NFL games. The NFL games brings about, or the NFL league in general brings about, approximately $2 billion in revenue, right? So it's also been reported that 27 million viewers watch NBC, which is one channel, coverage of NFL games on one Sunday. There was an author of a book called Candy Fruit named Steve Allen, who's also a former Oakland Raiders fan, said that, pertaining to this topic, he said that football is a way for Americans to indulge in their lust for violence, their racial fixations, and yearning for society controlled by men and their social kingdoms, while all its players suffer injuries and everyone's died. We all know that, of course, this topic isn't an easy topic to argue. Most Americans, including myself, love football. I played football since I was a little kid. You know what I'm saying? Football is considered the real American sport. No matter how heartfelt or reasoned this topic is, when people say, "Oh, people should support this football league," people say, "Well, football is what I love. This is what I like. This is what I want to watch." It's like other things. So, what people don't realize is the damage that's caused by the injuries that these players suffer while they play. It doesn't just affect the player; it affects their families and the people that are around their communities. At what point do we sacrifice the entertainment of our sport for our love, for our fantasy of another human being who's suffering from these brain injuries, these knee injuries, and take to a point to where they want to kill themselves? They feel like their lives isn't worthy anymore. So allow their families to be broken, sitting at home wishing they had their mother, their father, their brother, their nephew, their son, sitting in their living room laughing, joking, being part of a normal family. If you don't believe me, have Dave Durson, who was a Pro Bowl, born November 28, 1960, died February 17, 2011. Shot himself in the chest. Such a man with great achievements, a lot of money, great family. You know, who would want a man to cause himself to want to take his own life? Another guy, Junior Seau, 10-time All-Pro runner.
Junior Seau took his life because of CTA, but he's also on Ambien, which is a sleeping drug that also has led to increasing people wanting to commit suicide when they have thoughts of depression. So.
We have Javon Belcher, who's also a former player for the Kansas City Chiefs, murdered his girlfriend and himself, and killed himself outside the team's practice facility as his coach defeated him just a little over 2 years ago. Knowing this information, things like that, people deal with suicide each and every day. I personally have taught people to do suicide, and for you to know such a thing to say, oh well, he's on the drug or whatever, but what was put in place to prevent? What is put in place to take that away from him having even a slice of it that he had no help, that he decided this is the end for me, this is it, I'm done with this. As I said before, we love to watch football, but most of us refuse to think about the sport's evil manipulative power. We are just responsible as the owners and the players and watchers. Why? Simply because hiding the truth hurts. When somebody hides the truth from you and you know about it later, what do? You get angry, you get mad, you have emotions that come behind you. It may not be as much as, people remember Leonard Brown pretty much whacking Reggie Bush when he tried to make it right and Reggie Bush swallowed off the field. But, let's think about these injuries. In just 2 weeks of this current season, 15% of all NFL football players have already officially suffered an injury. According to official statistics released by the NFL, 234 players were dealing with various kinds of injuries before entering into the season. This season that's going on right now. This includes 12 concussions, 2 neck injuries, and other unspecified injuries to the head.
Isn't the NFL season over?
It is now. True, it is over now, but it's still technically the most current season as well. Also reported in the second week play, another 16 players suffered injuries so severe that they need to be moved from the field, i.e. field safety. Aaron Williams suffered a neck injury and was taken off the field via ambulance. So thinking about things like that, people say, oh yeah, that's part of the game. That's what people sign up for. And granted, that's true, but just like a soldier, I joined the Army trying to better my life. Yeah, I knew I was going to deploy. I knew I was probably going to get blown up and get shot. But who wants to get blown up? Who wants to sustain and get shot at? Come home and say, oh, well, you did your job. We don't care about you anymore. You're not going to fix the health issues that you have because you done your duty. So, we find out also in the research that for more than 5 years, the NFL studies found that its players are most likely to be diagnosed with diseases such as Alzheimer's than the average American, including a rate of 19 times the normal rate for men ages 30 through 49. The NFL admitted in court documents that nearly 1 in 3 retired players would likely develop long-term cognitive problems. A brain bank ran by the Department of Veteran Affairs announced it had found evidence of a brain disease called CTE in 76 of 79 foreign players examined, which we all know is a movie presented like concussion and stuff like that. CTE leads to rage, depression, dizziness, memory loss, dementia, and so much more. Playing football at such an elite level, it has become a standard that these players take high-level hits to the head, to their bodies, to even get what you call a good play or a great play to sustain a great career. And it can be devastating even deadly, as we know. All these players, the players that I mentioned, have suffered from CTE. And all I ask is, think about yourself and think about your family. This was your brother, this was your father, your nephew. Would you know such a thing? Would you continue to say, oh, you know what I'm saying, just keep playing, you got money, be good. What in that aspect do you sit there and think to yourself, man, this man has a problem, I need to fix it regardless if he has money. Money doesn't equal happiness. Robert Williams killed himself, and he had plenty of money. He did anything.
We thank the Prime Minister for their speech and welcome from the opening opposition, Max Jungries from They Took Our Name, to speak for the opposition case. Hear, hear.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we the opposition believe that football fans do not have a moral responsibility to stop supporting the NFL. And we believe that because we think that the evidence for this proposition is tenuous, the motion has major consequences for the livelihoods of individuals involved in it, and disrespects the choices of others, and overall takes the wrong approach to a serious issue. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is our current understanding of CTE, because CTE is the thing that has generated a lot of this controversy. It's the brain damage that's found in a lot of these players after they've died. So first of all, this is not something that you can diagnose until after a player is dead. So all of our current actual diagnoses of CTE are from former players. And there are a lot of issues with using diagnoses from former players to make predictions about the future health of current players. If that makes any sense. So first of all, most of the players who have had CTE diagnosed played decades ago. The game has changed greatly since then, both in the way it is played by the players, in terms of the regulations, the nature of the game itself. All of this makes it a lot harder to apply these cases to the way that the NFL operates now. Go ahead.
You said that actually there have been players that have died from CTE. And recently, February 17th, 2011, Dave Dorsey football recently, not just the past.
That's why it's in But so most are from the past, and I'll move on to some of the ones who have been diagnosed in the present in just a second. So there's another issue, which is that a lot of football players who've been diagnosed with CTE never played in the NFL. So it's a little bit hard to attribute CTE directly to experiences players have had in the NFL, because you have to consider the fact that before the 3.3 average years that a player will spend in the NFL, they probably spent about 8 years playing high school and college football, where the rates of injury and concussion are much higher. CTE is an issue brought on by concussions. Do the math.
Earlier you mentioned that CTE can only be diagnosed through death. If you think about CTE, it's closely related to TBI. And TBI is so analyzed before they even go to a morgue, whether they're alive or dead. So that's not the case. People don't realize that people have been checked for it after the fact that they have killed themselves and put themselves in a position to where they can get checked. But people are not progressing them to go as friends, as people who know the problems already exist.
I can address the changing attitude of the NFL towards CTE in just a moment, and also the changing nature of our knowledge. But so because it's possible that players who have CTE develop the conditions that would lead to CTE before they ever got to the NFL, it's hard to attribute the current cases of CTE directly to the NFL. CTE has been shown to be amazingly prevalent in players who only ever played in high school football. There was a case of a kid who recently killed himself who was only 17, who had played high school football and had CTE. So overall, it's hard to attribute CTE just to the NFL, which complicates the issue. Furthermore, not supporting the NFL because of past player injuries isn't necessarily helpful to these former players, because these former players do not need the support. We have a legal system that allows players who are suspected of having CTE or have head injuries to seek compensation from the NFL. And in the recent past, they have. In the last few years, the NFL has paid out almost $2 billion in settlements to former players who came together in mass to sue the NFL for head injuries. Not at this time. And a great deal of that money went to not just their medical care, but also to research. So if we were to support from the NFL, where would these players seek compensation? Thank you. Okay, so actually, yeah, go ahead.
Actually, compensation cannot cure death and mental stress from the family if you've lost somebody due to NFL neglect.
That's absolutely right, but in this case, it is the best that we can do. These people are going to need support in the future, and so also we need to respect the autonomy of players who are playing right now. So in the current NFL, CTE is no longer a hidden issue. It's something that all players know the risks of. All players know the risk. Players tend to know the risks of what they're doing. They understand that what they're doing are dangerous, not brains which survive in general, and they are well compensated for those risks, especially when you compare them with other dangerous professions. But thank you. Commercial fishing in this state pays a lot less and has a much higher mortality rate. But we're not up here today bashing that. Also, the NFL has taken steps to combat the problem and is in the process of changing. For instance, they've added independent evaluators to the game, both on the sidelines and in skyboxes, that have actually increased the rate of concussion diagnosis. They've also been progressively changing the rules that minimize the aspects of gameplay that lead to head injuries, and there's also been a report culture change among players who will self-report concussions more, which is one of the most important factors of being able to diagnose a concussion. I guess what we're trying to say is that this is a really big decision. Not supporting the NFL means no NFL, not at this time. And before you take action on something, you need to think about the consequences of your action. And we're not saying this isn't an issue, but we do think that this is maybe the wrong thing to do about this issue. Thank you.
And we thank the Leader of Opposition for their arguments and welcome Ashley Gaines from Afro Pride to speak for the government case. Here, here.
have the evidence that will prove beyond a reasonable doubt that NFL fans should refrain from supporting the NFL. We know that football is America's game. Football is composed of extreme athleticism, controlled mayhem, and violence. Yes, I said violence. That fuels the hunger for domination in football, America's game. Now, it is our most loved sport and also a billion-dollar industry that we spend days, weeks, and even months, yes, months, patronizing and spending paychecks on season tickets, on that latest jersey, or on the purchase of that Dish Network season ticket to get every game on your flat screen. We even have it on our smartphones. You know, don't forget your favorite fantasy picks. You know, yesterday I created the perfect roster, or so I thought. The fantasy app said, no, sorry, not today. You can't pick Peyton today. He's on the injury list. He just took a blindside hit from a 350-pound linebacker. Broken ankles, torn ligaments, separated limbs. People, this is a problem. We should not support a sport that causes death. We should not be endorsing nor supporting death by athleticism. I mean, it's just football, right? At this time. You know, hey, he'll be fine with the shot of Toradol and Novocaine. But in a couple years, when he retires from the game and the cameras are gone, he'll be okay. Or will he? His mind will start to turn on him. He will go insane, maybe even lose his sanity. His legs might not work like they used to. And his back will be contracted, twisted in knots. At what cost? At what cost are we going to allow ourselves to support brutality on the field and negligence from the NFL ensuring the safety of its players? Junior Seau, Andre Waters, Terry Long, Chris Henry, all NFL players that showed and were proven to have suffered from traumatic brain injuries during their careers. Now, we are all humans, and we have morals and values. If my brother, father, or husband was in the NFL, I wouldn't want to lose them. Death is hard for everyone and can be devastating to that son, that daughter, that mother, and that wife. For the players that do live with chronic traumatic encephalopathy and do survive, they are forever paid with debilitating effects, such as increases chances of dementia later in life. Or many live with ALS, more commonly known as Lou Gehrig's disease, which weakens the muscles and impacts the nervous system. As fans, we need to take into consideration that concussion diagnoses have increased by a third since the NFL has let independent medical officials assess players. The opposition may say that they knew what they were getting into when they signed the NFL contract.
The concussion diagnosis has gone up because the NFL has started to screen for this more. The same reason autism diagnoses go up, because we are looking for it so that we can better treat the people who are affected by it. The NFL with their concussion diagnosis, we are more aware than we've ever been of CTE.
Which brings me to my next point. That is not necessarily true. For many CTE having the opportunity to be in the NFL because of their athleticism allows many men who are mainly of black race to go from poverty to wealth. But at what cost? That was not disclosed to them when they signed their last wage. Dr. Bennett O'Malley's autopsy of Mike Webster, a Pittsburgh Steeler who suffered from years of cognitive and intellectual impairment and mood disorders, led to the discovery of chronic traumatic encephalopathy from repeated blows to the head from playing football. Players have continued to be diagnosed with chronic traumatic encephalopathy, which is a degenerative brain disease that causes one, for lack of a better word, to lose their mind. Repeated blows to the head, even with the protection of a helmet, cannot protect the brain, and that has been proven. Even with these new technology, helmets, new medical practices, you cannot protect the brain from anything that is man-made.
Even CTE is really unfortunate, but what do you have to say about the NFL offering up to $4 million to players who are even alive that are found with the disease, and they've decided to get rid of the cap on how much money can be allocated to players?
$4 million is not a sure life. Ladies and gentlemen, on September 30th, 2014, researchers with Boston University Recent Information announced that out of 79 brains of former NFL players, 76 of the 79 brains tested positive for CTE. We as Americans have morals, and we need to have morality for our fellow man. We need to value life. We, the people of America, the greatest country, the greatest sport to ever be played in history, need to save the players before we save the game.
Okay, so the study that you mentioned, before those players died, they actually had asked them to submit people. So all the people involved in that study were already suspected to have had CTE before they died, and they submitted themselves. So the results of that study are skewed. It indicates that there is an issue with CTE, does not indicate that it is prevalent.
Protected time. Order.
Some of the players were recent players who have committed suicide, such as Junior Seau, and other players are from the past reigns. Thank you.
We thank the Deputy Prime Minister for her points and welcome Mr. Nathan Burns from They Took Our Name to speak for the opposition case. Here, here.
What are we talking about in tonight's debate? Both sides are talking about it. We're not talking about the NFL. We're not talking about plans. We were talking about the players and the actions that we can do that will most benefit them. Now, I'd like to respond to both the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister. They repeatedly talk about what would we want for your players, what would we want from the people you care about. That these players, after in many cases playing football for 20 years, wanted to follow their life's vocation. I believe that in regards to any other form of autonomy for what people have with their bodies, when they are consenting, educated, 18-plus adults, that they should be allowed to do it. I would not want my child to not follow up on his dreams. I would want people to follow through with this. That these players that we were talking about today's NFL, everybody who re-signs a contract is aware of the risks. It is the same risk. If I were to go down to Seward to make $40,000, risking my life to pull crab legs out of the sea, I'm allowed to do it, and people will support me by buying crab legs. Yes.
Okay, so you said support the dreams, but what about the dreams after he gets out with all these injuries? What are you supposed to do then when he has no job? He has no money, he has no care afterwards. Nobody's giving him that care. The NFL doesn't offer you anything to give you after you're done. They just done it, you got your money.
Even outside of the multi-billion-dollar settlements they offer and the funds that they've set up for players, that the NFL realizes this is the issue. That they have passed 23 rule changes in the past year. And don't get me wrong, CTE is an issue that matters, but it affects us at all stages of the game. The deputy and the Prime Minister would both agree that football is America's game. And while there are tragedies in the NFL, there are tragedies with this game outside of the NFL. in 2014, we lost 8 separate high schoolers to traumatic brain injury sustained while playing football. That both high school and college have a higher rate of injury than the NFL.
All right, do you believe that the NFL incentivizes these players to play high school?
I would say the fact that 40% of Americans list football as our greatest sport incentivizes it. I'd say the fact that it is already there. The NFL is not selling people something that they do not already have. They are taking these steps to not at this time. They are already taking these steps to work through this. These are well-paid professionals and they understand the risk. And if we're talking about exploitation in society, this is not the place we want to talk about. If we want to talk about football, if Americans should hypothetically choose a safer sport than football, that is a fantastic question and entirely outside of the scope of this debate. We are talking about the best institution from which we can prep it to solve and discuss these issues. That we have a players' union. Those players are able to advocate on their behalf. In 2009, they petitioned the NFL for rule changes and said rule changes went through to help minimize the risk of concussions. Let's talk about support. The best thing we can do is support those players in their dreams. That's what supporting somebody means. You can stick with their dreams. I'll take the second half.
So you say that the NFL is the best institution to make this research and stuff happen. Why is it then that the military is the one that provides all the research to the NFL?
Well, the military certainly is a part of it, but we also, and I was talking about that way more in the scope of that. High school and college players are suffering injuries at traumatic rates, and do you know what? There's no revenue with which you can fund CTE studies in high school football. That we are talking about helping the game in every portion of the game. That the NFL is not the same NFL of yesterday. They've since fired many of those people involved in the changes. If I wanted to support say band I like, if I wanted to support them in their creation of art, is the way I support them by not listening to their music, not going to their shows, not buying their t-shirts, and telling my friends to not support the band? Or do I follow them through with this, that we are talking about the players and supporting their choices? And the best way we can do that is to stick with them, the choices that they made. Every person there is a conscious member, is somebody who has conscientiously made the decision to stay a part of the league. So we are on this side of the house, firmly of autonomy and personal choice. Not at this time. I'll take the more right at the end. All right. And we also want to talk about the NFL potentially as also a almost uniquely valuable American institution. That in an era where all we do, where you can watch anything you want on your smartphone without making eye contact with another person for a day, there is one thing that unites 1 out of every 3 Americans, man, woman, and child, on Sunday to watch something together. This Super Bowl turnout rates is almost as good as the primary elections and beats out off non-presidential elections. That this is something that Americans can rally around. It's unique in our society, and we believe that has merit in and of itself. That it is a contact sport. But if we want to talk about other issues that can we support athletes risking themselves? Every athletic vocation at its highest level is dangerous. We see similar issues with Olympians. If you want to talk about a sport that sees, if you want to talk about something that sees its players gone too early, that sees people suffering lifelong traumatic experiences, that's violent, that's risky. We're talking about the evil thing called ballet. Ballerinas suffer these issues for their art. And we as a society support the choices that adults make. That's what we're on the side of. We believe that the issues are far greater than the proposition would say, as Max so eloquently put when he was talking about the mathematics of CTE. We are talking about the NFL as a valuable institution where players can lobby for their own things, that is making changes, and we are making progress towards this. And we are lastly talking about supporting people in the decision that they make. That we want, that the players don't want to be out of a job. We want to support them in their choices because they don't need our busybody paternalism. We on this side of the house are proud to oppose. Thank you.
thank the Deputy Leader of Opposition for closing the top half of the debate, and welcome the Member Gov, Ian Miller from the Blues Brothers, to speak for the second proposition team. Hear, hear.
So I'd like to say that I had a nice opening for that, but following up traumatic brain injuries with ballet is kind of throwing a little bit of a kink in my plan. To begin with, I'd like to start with a few points of deconstruction. To begin with, we've heard from the opposition that some of the folks that have been counted for CTE issues only played football in high school. Well, frankly, if that's the case, then why would they have ever desired to play football to begin with if they had no intention of ever playing pro football? To begin, my second point of deconstruction, we heard a little bit about dangerous jobs. I think someone said commercial fishing. Yeah, those people are going into dangerous jobs, but in those situations, they knew what the risks were. They weren't the risks were not being hidden by their employers before they even started working in those fields. And my final point of deconstruction that I'm still trying to kind of wrap my head around this one is we heard that there's more self-reporting going on of concussions in pro football. And yeah, but why would that make a whole lot of sense for these serious issues? Because if a player's not playing football, they're not making money. So if you're going to self-report an injury, I don't understand how you're correlating self-reports to actual injuries. None of the same. So on the closing half, we're going to make three points, and we're going to show that the NFL's great ignorance towards traumatic brain injuries and issues like CTE are really what demonstrate the reason why the fans are the reason that they need to make the move here. So our 3 points are going to be that the NFL is the catalyst for American football. Our second point is going to be that traumatic brain injuries hurt all players, and that injuries do not stop the money flow from going to people who actually make the money in football. And our third point is that the fans have a duty to act because it's essentially the right thing to do. Our first point, the NFL serves as the catalyst for American football since younger athletes strive to eventually play professionally. If it wasn't for professional sports, the number of people playing football in this country would be far lower than it actually is. This led to a development of vast football programs ranging from peewees to elite high school programs, massive college programs. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. In terms of high school football alone, over 1.1 million high schoolers play high school football around the country. And the end goal of these development programs is to create the best athlete who eventually are going to spawn on a professional team. It's not just to go out and play the game. All of this creates a situation where people are pushed to focus on football instead of academics and life skills. Unfortunately, that also means that football becomes the only option for a lot of folks. And unfortunately, when we look at the makeup of professional football teams, that's often leading to the folks who are racial minorities and from lower socioeconomic classes. I think,
You said that there'd be no reason that people wouldn't play high school football. What about if they wanted to spend time with their friends? What if they wanted to get more athletic? What if they wanted to engage in sport? By the time it is here overnight, if we could go with the NFL, every street in America, you will find kids moving out of the way for cars playing football. And what's the alternative?
So I don't disagree that it's not going to go away overnight, but I also don't think you're going to see the same extent of people playing a game lofty goal in the future. So we've heard that there have been folks as young as 18 now being diagnosed with causes of death related to CTE. Frankly, we don't feel that anyone who's 18 years old should be dying from anything, let alone from an athletic event. And along those lines, when people do get injured, whether it be PV, high school, college, so on and so forth, it's not the players who are going to still keep making the money. It's going to be the owners, it's going to be the coaches, it's going to be the league. Players aren't going to make money if they're sitting out. So the point we're trying to make here is that without the NFL, these younger players would not be striving to play in such a dangerous sport. Our second point refers to the expectation that players will experience head injuries during the course of the game. It's highly probable that every member of a football team will experience experience countless head injuries. That's why we have people on the sidelines who are sitting there with smelling salts to get people back into the game as fast as they can. Football teams anticipate injuries. And frankly, I'm not a football expert, but when the end goal of a defensive play is to tackle whoever has the ball, what do you expect by injuries? The point we're making is that football is today's blood sport. It's meant to make injuries. It's not meant to be a lovey-dovey feeling game. It's meant to make injuries. Our third point, and actually, I'd like to make one more little tidbit to that. We heard in the top half that when folks go off to war, when soldiers, other dangerous occupations are going to their job, it's with an expectation that they will receive protections, they will receive compensation. They're not going to be hidden from the actual source of the money at the end of the day. Not this time. Our final piece of construction is the fans have a moral duty to act because it's the right thing to do. Professional sports are a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, but without the fans, sporting wouldn't exist. Sporting wouldn't survive, and certainly not to the level that we see professional sports. CTE was first reported in players in 2005. Soon thereafter, the NFL tried to hide those findings. They tried to pressure the people who came up with those findings to not report them. The NCAA was founded in the early 1900s after 18 deaths and over 150 serious injuries resulted in a single season of college football. But yet, we don't find that college teams are protecting their players at all. We're finding that college teams ignore the guidelines put in place by the NCAA, and apparently that isn't an issue for the leagues and for the corporations that are running these multi-billion-dollar industries. So in closing, it is our position that the NFL's greed and disregard for the players has created a situation where fans need to be the catalyst. They need to be the people to rise up to cause change, and they need to be the people to come forward with their pocketbooks to initiate that change. It's not, yes, we're going to have injuries. We're not going to discount we're going to have injuries, but we need to handle those injuries appropriately and provide the protections for those athletes that we possibly can. Thank you.
We thank the member of government for his speech, and we welcome the member of opposition, Garrison Thoreau, from Spunk Funk, to speak on behalf of the closing opposition. Hear, hear.
The opposing team was talking about what would replace the NFL, where the NFL would be gotten rid of, and my response to that is the American Football League, which was created in 1960 and had to merge with the NFL, and frankly, I think they've been wanting to get back into the game ever since they had to merge in 1960. But anyways, so my first topic is going to be on the rule changes that the opening opposition was alluding to. Some of these rule changes include getting rid of some of the NFL's most dangerous plays, which have been known to lead to concussions. These rule changes include moving the 30-yard kickoff line up to the 35-yard kickoff line to create more touchbacks. What's a touchback? It's where the kickoff receiver takes the knee instead of choosing to run forward. And the NFL identified that 50% of the concussions were coming from these dangerous kickoff returns. So, by eliminating so many kickoff returns and having touchbacks, the NFL has done a lot to prevent concussions. Another important rule change that they've made is to get rid of the four-man wedge. What's the four-man wedge, you ask? It's where linemen stand next to each other and basically hold hands in a British bulldog-like fashion, and then they rush down the football field like a giant snowplow and just crush players, giving them all sorts of airborne concussions and what have you. So the NFL saw that that was a problem, and they also got rid of that to prevent head injuries. Spearing has also been eliminated. And spearing is a motion where NFL defensive player puts their head straight down and then rams into another player like a battling ram, which, as you all might think, would probably lead to a concussion. So the NFL has actually done a lot to prevent concussions in recent years. And they've also implemented medical examiners who sit up in the skybox and watch the field and look for players that are exhibiting signs of concussions. And if they see any player on the field who might be exhibiting signs of concussions, they can press a button. And when they press that button, play is immediately ruled dead. Yes.
You said that they have physicians in the skybox. A physician can have a sense of person unless they're down there actually feeling their pulse and with a light to check their eyelids to see if there's any destruction of the brain.
Well, actually, they did some research and they found that physicians were better. They're easily able to find players who are exhibiting signs of concussion from above the field, because if you're on the field, you can't see all the players that are moving around and whatnot, but when you're above the field, you might be able to see a player who's walking around a little bit deliriously. On top of that, I'm going to get into some of the discussion that the opening opposition was talking about CTE as a disease. CTE was only discovered back in 2002, so as a disease, it's quite young. So with furthering technology, a lot of research is going to come out about CTE, and this problem may not even be such a big problem within 10 years because it's such a new disease. And with things like stem cell research and all that, CTE may not be such a big problem come 15 years down the line. Another thing that the opening proposition talked about was death, death, death. Yes, I'm not going to lie to you guys. Football is very dangerous, and honestly, the only way to eliminate all injuries would be to have them play two-flag football, and everybody would have to walk around at a walking pace. But, my argument is the danger is good, actually. The danger is what makes sports exciting, What's more interesting? You and your buddies bouncing down 76th Avenue, catching maybe 5 inches of airtime, or Travis Pastrana launching himself 250 feet in the air on New Year's Eve, and then doing a backflip off of a 10-story platform. As Marshawn Lynch would say, I'm all about that action, Bob. So, yes, football is dangerous, but that danger is what makes it exciting. Football has never been billed as a nice sport. It's always been billed as a bloody, gridiron, gladiatorial combat to the death. And NFL players have always known that football is dangerous. They may have not known about concussions, but you can see a meniscus tear. You can see an ACL tear, herniated discs, fracturing their collarbone, turf toe, all sorts of injuries have been prevalent in the NFL since it started. So to say that players didn't know the NFL is dangerous and that they went into this blind without knowing it's dangerous is just a silly assertion. They've always known it's dangerous. I'll take the end.
Cool. So now that we've heard all of the rules in football,
well, there's not going to be a rule that prevents tackling, because tackling is what makes football dangerous and is what makes football exciting. We pay these people millions of dollars so that they'll pummel each other on the field in gladiatorial combat. That's why we watch football. And that doesn't make us bad people, because these people, they sign up willingly. They willingly sign up. They sign those contracts as adults. There's no minors in the league. Yep, that's it.
And we thank the member of opposition for his arguments, and we welcome Mr. Christian Bohr, the member whip, to close the government's case. Hear, hear.
Today in my speech, I'm going to address 3 main points. My 3 main points
say that football is still dangerous, and this is what makes the sport great. Now, we're here to argue that concussions are bad, right? Football is dangerous. We're never going to get rid of the concussions. And for this reason, we have to consider the rights and the lives of the players, pre and post football. I also said CTE is a new disease and there's not much research, but what research we have shows that it's very dangerous and very detrimental to the person's lifelong cognitive abilities. Lastly, you said the danger is going to make sports exciting. I say danger is going to make sports exciting, but it's detrimental to the players, and when it comes at the cost of their lives, for the benefit of the owners and of the league, it is unethical, and for that Now, I plan to stand up here and talk to you a lot about deconstruction. I don't think I'm going to have time for all that, so I'm going to breeze through it really quickly. Opening opposition led off with the current diagnosis is only a form of players in the game has changed. But we know that the game has changed, but the game still remains dangerous, so this point is moot, and players can still suffer from CTE. You also brought up that helmets would help, and new technologies would help players not get concussions yet. No amount of helmet is going to stop your brain from rattling inside your skull when you're running 20 miles an hour. You also alluded to the free will of the players, right? So the players knew what they were getting into before they ever joined football. So while this is true maybe today, it wasn't true in the past. And we still believe that players are incentivized to play football. Yeah.
200-pound defensive back who can run a 40-yard dash in 4.5 seconds can generate 1,600 pounds of force. I mean, it's not that far to say that getting hit by somebody going that fast and creating that much force would be dangerous.
Yeah, of course it's dangerous. That's why it causes concussions. All right, so back to free will of the players. So players are allowed to go to the sport. You know, they're allowed to conduct these very dangerous activities with each other, right? 1,600 pounds of force running at each other. So what I'd like to say is if your friend has a drinking problem, right, you don't say, you know, he's doing it of his own free will. He knows the dangers that are involved. He knows what he's doing. He's drinking. You don't give him $100 every single time he takes a shot because that would be unethical. You're enabling his bad activity. By supporting football, you're enabling the players, no thank you, to commit these actions which are going to impact them for the rest of their life. Now, you also said the NFL is funded by society, or supported by the society, right? So we have a society in the United States that supports the NFL, and the NFL stands because us fans want the NFL. You also alluded and said that the NFL needs to exist because the people of the United States want the NFL to exist. Now, I don't believe that this is a just point because we're placing our rights, our entertainment rights, over the lifelong cognitive development of these people. We're saying that we want to like each other, but we don't want you to live a normal life after you play football, and we won't care about you post-football because what your utility is to go and bang your head against each other. No, thank you. All right, so now I'd like to go ahead and review the arguments we heard from both the proposition and from the opposition. Leading prop told you football is a gladiator sport, supported by the closing opposition. So, the benefits of NFL to players is cash, right? The NFL gives players an ability to make money off of something that they're good at, right? Well, this is good, but not really because the NFL coaches, the owners, and the commissioners still make more and over longer periods of time than the NFL players make in their careers. I believe that putting this long-term cognitive depression on the people is not just for everybody out.
Okay. Would you support a friend going into the trades where they are going to work their body down for far less compensation, will suffer long-term health issues to feed their families? Would you support their choice in that regard, or would you go, you shouldn't work in that trade, you should work in McDonald's?
Okay, what about OSHA? OSHA set up as a government agency set to protect the workers' rights, right? And when you get hurt on the job, no thank you, you're given certain rights, you're given workman's comp, you're given some sort of, no thank you, you're given some sort of, let me try to phrase my words, you're given an ability to live a life after your injury. NFL making money off of its players. Now, why is this catalyst for NFL creating a larger society of football bad? Well, we know that there are players who are subjected to concussions from a young age, and it's not limited just to NFL players. So by allowing the NFL to exist, we incentivize players to be able to go into football, to hurt themselves, to continue on to high school, to focus more on their football than on their schooling, and this leads them to not being able to have life after football, not only because of the concussions, but because they focus so much on playing football and playing a sport. We should more encourage education rather than encouraging football. And before my time runs out, I'd like to say that NFL makes money off of players. Making money off of a player for a short term, leaving them with cognitive disabilities for the rest of their life for entertainment value is not just and it is unethical. We are proud to oppose.
We thank the government whip for summarizing the debate, and we welcome the opposition whip, Kelly Ireland, to end today's debate. You're here.
Good evening. I would like to start off with addressing some of the points just made. You said that students who play football are going to focus more on their football than their schoolwork, but that's actually not true because you actually have to make a certain GPA to play those sports. I would like to start off with saying that NFL players are all adults. They are consenting. They know the risks when they go into NFL. They know that it's going to be dangerous, and yet they still sign up for it. People do the same thing in Army, and they're less compensated for it. They know that there's dangers in joining the Army. They know that they might have injuries. They know they might die. They sign a blank check up to their life, but they still do it. And we're not telling you to have to of NFL player not play football. Another thing I'd like to address is that the NFL has made a ton of rules and policy changes to increase safety of players. I mean, it's changing, it's evolving, it's getting better.
You said people encourage people to join the Army, but not the NFL. Well, if you think about the Army, the reason that we have the rights that we have here is because men and women put their lives on the line, so you can have the students be here through this debate. That's the first thing. The second thing is, you're telling me that people have education. Well, the minimum GPA is 2.2. That is the lowest there. Fundamental based on sports, not academics. You can ask any player, and they get taken out of college. However, you have people that go get drafted in high school. Out of high school. So not in high school. Out of high school. Going straight to the NBA. How do you put it? So you're telling me
Thank you.
Okay, so, yeah, people in the Army go and they fight for our freedom. But guess what? As an adult, because the Army goes and fights for our freedom, people have the right to sign up for the NFL and be players. They have freedom because of our group to do that. Another thing is, yeah, the GPA is low, but these kids might not have gone to college otherwise if it weren't for sports. They're still going to college.
you can pay me $4 million. That's my compensation rate. But if I got brain damage and I'm having thoughts in my head killing myself, I'm not thinking about $4 million. I'm thinking about the Army has set up where you have a GI Bill so you can go to do education and things like that. Where's the NFL?
Thank you.
I don't see an NFL.
Thank you.
Yes, the status quo, like, it's not right that these players are being pushed aside who have injuries. But, I mean, CT is a relatively new disease. We're just learning about it. We're still learning about it. We're not going to know everything right away, and we're not going to do everything right away. But that doesn't mean we should stop playing football. We should stop watching football because we don't know everything that's happening right now. Like, just because we don't know now doesn't mean we won't know in, like, 5 years how to treat these players and how to make sure that after the NFL they're still healthy. That's it.
Right, let me ask you to join me in saying thanks to all these teams for their terrific afternoon here. Our panel of judges is making their way out of the room right now. As they're doing so, I'm reminding our tradition here at the Cabin Fever Debates is to let the judges pick which individual team they're going to send on to semifinals. But we like to know what our audience thinks about the motion itself. So, following the traditions of the House of Commons, we're going to do our own division of the House, where I'm going to ask you to say aye if you support the proposition, and nay if you support the opposition. So, on the motion, given the mounting evidence of long-term cognitive damage sustained by players, football fans have a moral duty to refrain from supporting the NFL. If you are in favor of this motion based upon the arguments you heard